wherever we are today, whether we're here in this building or in our bedrooms or in our living rooms, I ask that you make me and the rest of us aware that you are here. That you are bigger and more than anything we could try to describe or define. That our worry and stress of the future, regret of the past has the ability to be lifted away from us just by being around you. I want to encourage you wherever you are, whether you're here this morning in the building or you're at home or in your car. Hopefully you're not in your car right now. Morning, Tammy, Joe, and Scott. See you guys up there on Facebook. Every time we do this, we get it's a chance, it's an opportunity to connect, to experience Creator. That's more than just showing up to church or knowledge that God is real or some sort of theology we believe. It's a real thing, a real feeling, experience, a reality that we all have a chance to step into. We don't have to know how to do it. We don't even have to know who God is. You just have to be willing and open. Doesn't matter how Christian we think we are or don't think we are, it can still be equally as difficult because we get busy and get distracted and want control. I know I do. I feel it even now. I feel my mind and body not wanting to let go. So God, as we begin to sing, as we begin to connect with you, I ask that you help me and help my family here online and in this room to let go. Let you in. To breathe out our stuff. And to breathe in your peace, your security, your acceptance, and your love. And the day lies open. Night has passed. And the day lies open before us. Let us pray. One heart and mind. Let us pray with one heart and mind. Let us pray with one heart and mind. Let us pray. as we rejoice. As we rejoice in the gift of this day, in the gift of this day, in the gift of this day, in the gift of this day. Morning comes with the light of your presence. Morning comes with the light of your presence upon us. Let us pray with one heart and mind. Let us pray with one heart and mind. Let us pray with one heart and mind. Open me up. Let us pray with one heart and mind. As we morning is broken like the first morning. Blackbird is spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the gift of your day. gift of your day, in the gift of your day. It's your love so undeniable, I can hardly speak in your peace. So unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still in the love, 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 love. So undeniable, I can hardly speak in your peace. So unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still in the love, 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 who I am. Who I am. Let me not define myself by my mistakes. Let me not define you by what other people say. Let me not give up, I'm pressing into you. When the hard stuff comes, look for you. Look for you. sing that out to him.
Well, good morning and welcome to Riverbend. Whether you're here in person or online, we are so glad to have you. And isn't that a great reminder that God is making us new? And isn't that why we gather? Because He does beautiful things in our lives. He's not done with us yet. My name's Sam Boone, and I'm the family pastor here at Riverbend. And it is a great day for me to be here. One of the things that I believe is that God has created us for community. That each of us are made to need relationships and deep connection. In fact, our lives are so much deeper and so much better when we have those deep connections, and our faith is richer. And that's why today, at the end of service, we're going to be having an inside community brunch. That's an opportunity for you to connect with some of our community group pastors, our community group leaders, to hear from them, ask questions. If you're curious about getting connected, then you can follow the link in our Facebook page or on our YouTube page. We're going to have that in our live stream. We'll have it now, and then we'll have it at the end of the service. But again, that's at the end of the service. It's an opportunity to come and just find a group that's right for you. Whatever your stage of life, whoever you are, we have a community group that's right for you, and we'd love for you to join us. And so that is going to be exclusively online. We were going to be in person, but because of the snow, isn't the snow great? Anyone enjoying the snow? Okay, there's like two of, all right, okay, good, yeah. The snow is amazing. But because of the snow, we're not going to do it in person, and it's just going to be online. So again, that link is going to be in our YouTube live stream and our Facebook live stream, and we'll have that at the end of the service. And we'd love for you to join us. I'd love to meet you, connect with you, and share a little bit more about our different groups. Also, on a different note, I want to say thank you to you as a church. Thank you for your generosity and your faithfulness in giving this last year. 2020 has been a hard year. It's been challenged. It's been difficult in so many ways. And yet, as a church, you have been so generous. And we ended the end of the year really positive and in a really good position this year to move forward, continuing to do all the things that we love to do in ministry. Working here at our church, doing community groups, working with kids, with teens, and just out in our city, feeding people, ministering to people, and even around the world. We get to do all of that because of your incredible faithfulness and your generosity. And so thank you. If you'd like to continue to give, you can follow the link on our screen, or if you're here in person, we have boxes set up all around the room, and you can drop your offering there. Thank you for your faithfulness. Would you join me in praying? God, we thank you. We thank you that you are faithful and that you are good to us, that you always provide for us. We thank you that you have made Riverbend a place where life change is happening here within this building and all around the city and all around the world because of what you're doing here. And so I pray that as we continue to give, that you would continue to bless us this coming year. We thank you for all that you do in our lives, Jesus, and we thank you that you are continuing to make us new. You're continuing to make beautiful things happen in each of our lives. We pray this all in your name, Jesus. Amen.
think about this. I know we have a lot on our minds, a lot going on around us in our country, in our community, in our lives, but I want you to think about this one thing. And it may seem unusual given the context and given the circumstances, but it's an important thing to think about today. I want you to think about this. Who would you say is your best friend? Who's your best friend? Realize in the context of the isolation and the separation of 2020, we may have lost track of people we would have considered to be our best friends. We perhaps are recalibrating, rethinking because of the changing circumstances, the changing relational dynamics of our lives. We may be thinking, well, maybe that person's not exactly my best friend. If you're one of those overly analytical types, you may say, well, I'm not sure. What do you mean by best? I mean, is it good best, better best, or best best? Are there degrees of best? Perhaps you've suffered at the hands of a best friend, or you're struggling with loneliness, and you're struggling with the sense of, I'm not even sure I have a good friend, much less a best friend. Or maybe you're one of those progressive egalitarian types who's saying, well, I'm not sure that the best friend is actually an appropriate definition. It's so patriarchal and segregationist. I'm not sure that we can say we have best friends. Or maybe you're like me, and it's just hard to define who your best friend is because you just have so many very, very good friends. It becomes difficult to say who is my best friend. I've had so many people who qualify as a best friend. About 30 years ago, I met a guy. He was a young single guy, and 30 years ago, I was much younger too, and we were the same age, but we were very different. I was a young pastor, and he was a young entrepreneur. He was starting a tech company in Dallas, and he was very successful. He was brilliant, and he was gone all the time. He was the first guy I ever knew who had a cell phone. Remember those cell phones that looked like a brick with an antenna on them? They were about that big. And he was the first guy who ever had one. And he traveled 25 or 26 days out of the month. And he would call me and say, Dave, guess where I am? I'd say, I have no idea where you are. He said, I'm in Idaho. Then he called me the next day, guess where I am? I said, I don't know. He said, New York. And then he called me the next day. He said, guess where I am? I said, I have no idea. He said, I'm in London. You want to have lunch? And I'm like, I'm not in London. He goes, no, tomorrow, I'll be back. And he had this beautiful 3-bedroom condo in Dallas with like no furniture in it because he was never there. And I remember going over to his house one time and I said, I got to see what he keeps in his refrigerator because he never ate at home. I don't think he knew how to cook. And I opened his fridge and for sure it was empty. There were 4 bottles of cheap champagne that American Airlines had given to him for like flying 1,000,000 miles, and a jar of salsa. That's all that was in his fridge. 4 bottles of cheap champagne and a jar of salsa. And when I opened the door to the fridge, the salsa fell out onto his kitchen floor and smashed and broke everywhere. So I called him and I said, hey, where are your paper towels? And he comes running down to the kitchen. He says, what? I said, where are your paper towels? He said, my paper towels? I don't have any paper towels. I said, well, what do you do when something like this happens? And with a completely straight face, without flinching, he looked at me and he said, move. Now, he was kind of a crazy guy, and we're still good friends to this day, but I can tell you what made him special to me was he believed in me. When I didn't believe in myself, when I wasn't sure anybody else believed in me, what qualified him as one of my best friends was that he always believed in me. You know, every year as the Earth orbits the sun, we kind of mark the completion of an orbit on a random and arbitrary day that we call the 1st of January. But after 365 and a quarter days moving around the sun, we kind of look at the first of a new year as an opportunity to reset, an opportunity for a fresh start, an opportunity to kind of begin again. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing for us to recalibrate and reorient from time to time. And New Year's gives us that reason. It gives us that sort of excuse. And the cool thing about New Year's is that we can use it as a reason to kind of say, I'm gonna start new. I'm gonna have a fresh start, a new beginning. And even though it's an unusual connection, it's a good idea. But I say if we're gonna start fresh, if we're really gonna start new, then why don't we do it right? Why don't we go all the way back to the beginning? Why don't we start with a clean slate? Why don't we start with a fresh page? Why don't we rearrange our life? Because we don't want to just pick up where we left off. You remember what it was like before all the chaos and all the struggle and all the uncertainty. We don't want to just pick up and start over. We want to start fresh. We want to start at the beginning. The very beginning. And for me, if we're going to start at the very beginning, we start at God's beginning. The very first words of the Bible, the very first words of Genesis are in the beginning. And last week, that's where we began. We began this sort of recalibration, this new beginning, this fresh start, this second chance at the very beginning. At the beginning of the creation of the heavens and the earth. And I said that when we do that, when we go back to the book of Genesis chapter 1, there's a lot of information there that we have to handle very carefully. Because I said that the Genesis 1 is like the third rail of theology. It's where the power is. But if you mishandle it, if you touch it incorrectly, it can shock you. Well, we looked at that last week and handled Genesis 1, but today, in our resetting, our reorienting, our reordering our world, we come to Genesis chapter 2. And if Genesis 1 is the third rail, Genesis 2 is a time bomb. Genesis 2 has all of the information about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the naming of the animals and all of the stuff that once you get into it, it becomes difficult, particularly in our day. It becomes volatile, issues of gender and identity and things that kind of trigger us. Fortunately, I am a trained theological bomb technician. And I know how to disarm Genesis chapter 2, but I can't do it alone. I need your help. I need you to take hold of the trigger wire. I need you to put your finger on that one thing that Genesis chapter 2 tells us we absolutely can never let go of. Can you do that? Because I can't disarm the volatile conversations that Genesis 2 provokes unless you're willing to hold on to that trigger wire and not let go. Because if you let go, the clock starts ticking and our relationships can be blown apart. See, it's my prayer today. My prayer that we'll hold on to that thing. We'll hold on to that one thing, that thing that is the power source, that thing that is the thing we all need. And that we'll hold tightly to that regardless of what's going on around us, that we will be committed to put our finger on that and not let go. It's my prayer every week that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in God's sight. And that God would use his word spoken by his servant and anointed by his Spirit, especially today, to remind us to hold on to the thing that we need, that none of us should let go of. It was last week we began a conversation about reorienting our life, about having a new beginning, and we entered into that conversation in the book of Genesis, in Genesis chapter 1, and I suggested that a theological way to understand Genesis chapter 1 is with an interpretive point of view that theologians call the gap theory. Genesis chapter 1 begins in verse 1, and it says that God created the heavens and the earth. And the gaps theory suggests that that is the story of creation. But at the story of creation, after creation, the earth was left tohu vabohu. It was left formless and void. And basically what the Bible is, from Genesis chapter 1, verse 3 to Revelation chapter 22, verse 21, it is the story of the restoration of creation order. That we are invited necessarily to participate with God in restoring order to the chaos of the world that we live in. That is why we are here. That is why we exist in this tear in space and time, this temporal, parenthetical existence that we have. We live here so that we can participate with God in bringing restoration to the chaos of creation. Now, Genesis chapter 2 then picks up where Genesis chapter 1 leaves off, and it has 5 sections. And the first section of Genesis chapter 1 seems like it belongs to, or of Genesis chapter 2, seems like it belongs to Genesis chapter 1, because Genesis chapter 2 begins with the story of the establishment of the Shabbat, the establishment of the Sabbath day. And the Sabbath day is the 7th day of the 6 days. And you think, well, this should be part of Genesis 1, not the beginning of Genesis chapter 2. But I think it's providentially spaced between. I mean, technically, you understand that the Bible was not written with chapter divisions or verse notations. The Bible was written probably on papyrus in continuous sentences. In fact, in the Hebrew language, there aren't divisions originally between the words. There were no vowels. It was just lists of consonants. And so the division between chapter 1 and chapter 2 was probably that Moses ran out of papyrus and said, okay, that's page 1, page 2. We don't know, but it doesn't matter. It helps us orient ourselves. But I think it's providential that we take a breath between the 6th day and the 7th day. Now, in Genesis chapter 2, there are 4 more sections. Genesis chapter 2 chronicles the creation. It goes forensically back to the 6th day and talks about the creation of the world, and particularly the creation of the first man, Adam, from the dust of the earth. The 3rd section of Genesis chapter 2 talks about the creation of the garden, and it describes the boundaries of the garden and the geography of the garden. And it points out that there were 2 special trees in the garden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The 4th section of Genesis 2 talks about how the first man went and worked in the garden and named all the animals, and that was where Adam lived in this near perfect state for we don't know how long. It could have been 100 million years. There was really no time boundary. But eventually it became obvious, and the final section tells us that because Adam was alone, and that was not good, that the crescendo of the recreation story is when God takes Adam's rib and creates Eve. The creation of the woman was the crescendo of the creation narrative. And it's in Genesis chapter 2 that we discover the thing that we all need. And it's pointed to by 3 things that we all have in common. 3 things that tie us together, 3 needs that we all have. And the first one is we all have a need for Shabbat, the 7th day. We all have a need for the Sabbath. Now, as Gentiles, as people who are not raised in a Jewish tradition, as primarily Christians, we don't really take the Sabbath as seriously as the people of God did, as the Jewish people do. The Sabbath is a law, is a practice that is layered over with literally hundreds of instructions. From the time of Moses, the people of God set apart themselves and never worked by honoring the Shabbat. And they became legalistic and militant about it. To this day, it's true. I was in Israel a number of years ago, and I was in Jerusalem on the Sabbath. We were staying at the Hilton Hotel in Jerusalem, and the Hilton Hotel had Shabbat elevators. On the Sabbath, they had 2 banks of elevators that would automatically stop on every other floor. One set of elevators stopped on odd number of floors. One elevator stopped on even number of floors because according to the Sabbath law, you couldn't press a button to tell the elevator what floor to go to because that was defined as work. At that same time, I was in Jerusalem. There was a headline in the Jerusalem Times, the newspaper in Jerusalem. Above the fold, the headline said that the Rabbinic Council of Israel, like the spiritual Supreme Court of Israel, had made a decision about whether or not it was appropriate for a person to pick their nose on the Sabbath. For real. It was a headline that says, nose picking approved on the Sabbath. Now, they had an asterisk on that. It was okay, according to the rabbis, to pick your nose on the Sabbath as long as you didn't remove a hair. Because if you removed a hair, that was cutting your hair, that was grooming, and that was work. This is how militant the people of God had become about keeping the Sabbath. And Jesus ran headlong into this. In Jesus' day, they were just as militant as this. They had dozens, countless, hundreds of regulations about what it meant to keep the Sabbath. And Jesus had collisions throughout the story of his life. In the four Gospels, there are stories, all four of them record stories about Jesus having confrontations with the religious leaders about what the Sabbath was supposed to mean. In fact, in all four of the Gospels, there's a record of 5 healing miracles that Jesus did intentionally on the Sabbath. And those healing miracles were so provocative and so volatile that it tells us in Mark chapter 3 that because he was doing these things on the Sabbath, because he was healing people, because he gave sight to the blind and caused a lame man to walk and healed a woman of a chronic lifelong disease and healed a man with a shriveled hand, because he did these healing miracles on the Sabbath, they decided that they needed to kill this young rabbi. Jesus talked about what the Sabbath really meant. And he said, if you understood what the Sabbath really meant, you would understand what it is there for. It is there for mercy, not sacrifice. That the purpose of Shabbat, the purpose of refuge and rest, is a gift to man. Man is not made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man. And he says, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. That's why Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you Shabbat. I will give you rest. Because the Sabbath cry of our hearts, we are fashioned in our DNA to long for refuge and safety and rest and mercy and forgiveness. That's why it's connected here to the sixth day. The sixth day when God created the animals and the livestock and created male and female in his own image. When he created us to make life better, to make the world a better place. And the way that we do that is through the gift of Shabbat. By giving someone else rest. By giving others forgiveness and mercy. By providing for them refuge. Rabbi Saul of Tarsus, who we know of as Paul the Apostle, said it this way in Galatians 6. He said, carry one another's burdens. Take up Shabbat for each other. Because in this way you fulfill the law, not the law of Moses, but the law of Christ. Because the cry of our heart, the longing of our souls is to be safe, to be at peace and at rest, to know mercy and grace and forgiveness, not just to experience it, but to express it. And we all need it, all of us. It is in the DNA of humanity, a longing for Shabbat. The second thing that Genesis chapter 2 reminds us of is that we all need a shared humanity. We need to remember that we don't row in the same direction so that we can conform to each other. We row in the same direction because we're all in the same boat. We're all made from the same stuff. We share this planet together. This is all we've got, is each other. We have a common ancestry. Genesis chapter 2 makes the preposterous claim that all of us go back to the same Father, that all of us go back to the same dirt and the same rib. No matter how many generations you go back, we will all eventually wind up. It doesn't matter what nation you're from or what tribe you're from, what race you're from, what your heritage is, what your associations are, what your beliefs are. We all go back, we come from the same dust and the same rib. Geneticists tell us that this is absolutely true, that genetically we have developed from the same gene pool. It's this idea that we need each other because we have a common ancestry. We also need each other and a shared humanity because we have this common insecurity. All of us. All of us need to matter. All of us need to make a difference. All of us need to be valued. All of us need significance. It was there in the garden. When God made the first man, he put him in this Garden of Eden, and the Garden of Eden was a perfect environment. And yet in the Garden of Eden, God gave Adam work to do. He gave him work. In a near perfect environment, God gave him work. And you know why God gave him work? Because it's where we find our significance, when we're productive, when we're contributing, when our lives matter. If I were to introduce you to a new person, a person you had never met, what would be some of the first things you want to know about that person? You might want to know their name. You might want to know where they're from. You might want to know whether they're single or married. All of those things you could discern in about 15 or 20 seconds. But I promise you that every one of us, even if we didn't ask the question, would wonder, what do you do? Because it's how we keep score. It's how we evaluate the significance of the people that we're meeting. We react very differently to a person who we meet who is a brain surgeon and a person who we meet who is an unemployed pin setter from a bowling alley that's been closed for 20 years. We realize that their lives have very different contexts. And even though we don't like to admit it, we want to be valued the same way. We want that significance. And so God gave Adam a job to tend to the garden and to name the animals. In Genesis chapter 2, there's this hilarious story of Adam, God bringing the animals from the garden to Adam, and he picked out their names. I mean, you could really have a heyday if you imagined the names that you might give the animals that you saw. I mean, if your children were naming them, that might be a squiggly and a squishy and an ew. But Adam was naming the animals. And by the way, have you ever heard anybody refer to the world's oldest profession? You know, the world's oldest profession is the exchange of personal favors, let's call it. Well, it's not. That's not the world's oldest profession. The world's oldest profession is zoologist, or maybe a farmer, or maybe a veterinary doctor, or somebody who cares for plants and animals. It's not what you think it is, you pervs. It's the zoologist is the oldest. And this is what he gave Adam to do, because we have a shared insecurity. We need to matter. All of us do. We also have a shared frailty. Our humanity we have in common because we have a common frailty, common vulnerability. And it's focused on that tree in the garden. It's focused on that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is a confusing thing, because the knowledge of good and evil is a good thing, isn't it? Knowledge is a good thing. Knowing things, learning, acquiring information is a good thing. Knowing things is good until we think we know everything. And then it becomes destructive. when we think we know it all, when we think we know everything, or we believe we have to know everything. It's what Martin Luther called the original sin, the sin of pride. And we are all vulnerable to it. If Genesis chapter 1 is the third rail theologically, and you have to be careful when you touch it, or it could hurt you, and Genesis chapter 2 is a time bomb, and you have to be careful when you handle it because it could go off. Genesis chapter 3 that we're going to look at next week is weapons-grade plutonium. And all you have to do is touch it, and you die. And the troubling news is we've all touched it. You see, we have these things in common. We share this common humanity. We long to know that we are made from the same stuff. We have the same ancestors. We have the same insecurity. We have the same frailty. We are all in the same boat. We're made from the same dust and the same rib. Genesis chapter 2 reminds us that we need these things. We need Shabbat, and we need shared humanity. And finally, it reminds us that we need family. We need family. I know this has fallen out of fashion, and there are a lot of things that have caused us to be forced to restructure our definition of family. The family that originated in the garden was the prototype, but the way that we experience family, the way that many of you have experienced family, is you have experienced the dysfunction of a family and the disillusion and the destruction of a family. And I meet people all the time who are carrying a lifetime of wounds because of the pain that came from their family. But it just goes to prove how essential it is. How important it is, because it's in the family that we find the one thing that is embedded in our souls, our longing for intimacy. Genesis chapter 2 concludes with the story of the creation of Eve, the first woman. It says that Adam was in the garden and he was alone, and God said, this is not a good thing for a man to be alone. I will make a suitable helper for him. And the story goes on and says that God put him into his sleep and removed a rib from him. And out of that rib, out of his side, out of that part of him that was closest to his heart, he fashioned the consummate human, the ultimate expression of God's creative ability. Was the last thing that he created. It was the woman. It was Eve. Person who is able to give life. It was so overwhelming that Adam, when he saw her, recognized that he was completed. And Genesis chapter 2 ends with this interesting observation. It says they were naked in the garden together and they felt no shame. Why? Because they found intimacy. And intimacy is developed and it is learned and it is practiced and is meant to be refined in a family. That is the laboratory in which we learn the value and the challenge and the difficulty and the risk of intimacy. That's where we're supposed to learn it. And our hearts long for it. We know these things. It is the cry of our heart. We live in a dangerous world. We live in a world that isolates us and separates us and denies us that longing for Sabbath and shared humanity. It denies us that longing for intimacy and family. But the point of Genesis chapter 2, the thing that we have to hold on to, and I need you to hold on to this because it's the only way we can diffuse the explosion that is tearing our families and our relationships and our culture apart. You have to hold on to this idea. It's verse 18 of Genesis chapter 2. It is not good for a man to be alone. We weren't meant to be alone. We were made for each other. The thing that we have to hold on to is this idea that even if we don't like each other, we need each other. And you ask yourself, how can I do that when people are such jerks? When the people around me are such idiots, when they seem to be dealing from the bottom of the deck, when they make promises that they don't follow through on, or when they talk about bringing people together, but they do it by subtraction, by elimination. They talk about unity, but really what they mean is uniformity. And there's sort of this double dealing from the bottom of the deck that's going on, and it makes it hard to trust other people, and it makes it hard to see others as trustworthy, but that's not the point. The point is not what we need others to be. The point is, who do we need to be? Do we need to be the kind of people who provide Shabbat, who provide rest and refuge and mercy and forgiveness? Are we the kind of people who operate from a shared humanity, aware of all of the things that we have in common, that we have so much more in common than the things that would divide us? And are we embracing others and welcoming them into our family and seeking to cultivate intimacy? It's difficult to do. It's really hard to do. But that's what makes it worth it, you see. It's the hard that makes it great. If it was easy to do, it would hardly be worth pursuing. It is what we are placed on this planet to do. It is how we restore God's intended created order. It is our role. It is why we exist in this tear, in this fabric of time and space, in this parenthetical moment we call our lives. It's why we live here. And because it's difficult, that just proves that it's worth doing. Not waiting till someone else becomes worthy of being a best friend. But I choose to live a best friend life now, even if you never change. It's tough for me, to decide who my best friend is. I mean, my friend from Dallas, we're still friends. We talked last week, and I still consider him one of my best friends. And the problem is I've been blessed. I've been so blessed with so many reliable, so many great friends, so many people who without reason, nonsensically said, I believe in you, Dave. I believe in you. I'm here for you. I have catalogs, lists of people who I consider to be quality friends. My life is enriched because of the blessing of those friendships. But as I evaluate my life, I tell you, I know I have one true best friend. The person who for almost 50 years chose to say, I believe in you. This year we will have been married for 44 years because, you see, I married my best friend. I married the person who through thick and thin said, I believe in you. Even when others don't, even when I don't like you, I still believe in you. I remember the day when we were going through some difficulty, and it occurred to me that the whole world around us could fall apart, but as long as we had each other, we'd be okay. Because I believe in her, and she believes in me. And that's what a best friend is. That's what a best friend does. So maybe the question that we need to think about is not really who is your best friend, but whose best friend are you? Maybe more accurately, the thing we should think about is, am I living a best friend life? Who do I believe in even when they don't deserve it? Think about these things.
someone, make me into someone who loves someone when I want to run from all this tension. Make me into someone who loves someone. Make me into someone who loves found its resting place, and I'll search no more. My hope has found its resting place, and I'll search no more. 'Cause even my darkness is light to you. Even my darkness is light to you. From the deepest of depths to the stars above, there is no place that can escape your steadfast love. It's hard to believe it, but you say it's true. But even my darkness is light to you. My hope has found its anchor safe in your rock. It holds my hope. Has found its anchor safe in your rock. It holds. Even my darkness is light to you. Yeah, even my darkness is light to you. From the deepest of depths to the stars above, there is no place that can escape your steadfast love. It's hard to believe it, but you say it's true. That even my darkness is light to you. May we live a best friend's life. May we know how to feel love, how to give it. God be with you guys this week. May you feel Him in your home, your car, your Zoom meetings. We'll see y'all next time. Go in peace. To someone light to you. It's light.